In this series, I speak with people who care deeply about education and offer thoughtful insight into where we might best place our attention in schools at the moment. I'm Anita, and welcome to Right Now. Today I'm joined by Louise Mansell, a clinical child psychologist specialising in early intervention and trauma-informed care. Louise works closely with children and families and partners with schools to embed trauma-informed approaches across whole communities. Louise has the ability to turn neuroscience and attachment theory into practical ideas teachers can use every day to help young people feel physically and emotionally safe. In this conversation, Louise explains why predictable environments matter, the importance of giving students choice and control, and how attending to students' nervous systems can support not only their well-being, but also their learning. Louise is an absolute joy to speak to, and I know you'll get a lot out of this episode. Louise, welcome to the Right Now podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. When I saw you speak in Sydney last year on the topic connection and regulation in classroom relationships, I just felt so incredibly inspired. I'd love to start by asking if you could share a little bit about your work and what first drew you to it.
So, working as a clinical psychology and then specialising for children with trauma, once I understood how important it was for those young people in particular to get the support in school, because as we'll talk about it, that's often the only opportunity that children might get to have a different version of the world and themselves and other people if they're living in homes that aren't otherwise safe for them or surrounded by people who aren't safe. So for me, schools then became this area where children had the opportunity to thrive if we could, I suppose, adapt the environment and adapt policies and procedures in a trauma-informed way, kind of using the neuroscience, but what does that look like in a classroom? So I became really passionate about teaching school staff what that looks like in a classroom. How do you translate that complex psychology and understanding of attachment into a routine to run a classroom?
Absolutely. You speak about the importance of students feeling seen, safe, and understood. From your work with teachers and schools, what does this look like when it's working well?
I think when it's working well, for me personally, I can see it and feel it, which I know might be a bit vague. You couldn't measure that, perhaps.
No,
Um,
it's so important how you
yeah,
feel.
I
Yeah.
mean, feeling seen and heard is essentially the foundations of emotional well-being. I know we can sometimes think, oh, it's great if we have programs coming in. It's great if you have clinical psychologists in your school. I'm not disputing that, but the essential criteria of self-worth is being seen and heard. It's a biological need to be seen and heard. So the importance of it, if you can get that through everyday interactions with a teacher, is so powerful for children's sense of self and their sense of others. And it looks as beautiful as it sounds. The child feels like they belong. They feel like they can go to that teacher and ask for help. They can put their hand up and ask questions because they know that it will be accepted and they will be noticed and supported with it. So you see this kind of confidence and this beautiful connection, and children are able to engage in learning so much more if they've got that relationship. It just makes everything easier.
You spoke about the power of everyday interactions and the micro moments and how they can either regulate or dysregulate students. Can you share what supports this, either from research or what you've seen in schools?
Yeah, I do remember sharing that. And I think I shared an example of being on the flight over there of how dysregulating it is if you're served, perhaps, on an aeroplane in that
Yes,
example.
you certainly did.
You're served by someone who isn't necessarily happy to be there or values you. And you notice it and it dysregulates us. And it's thinking about all those tiny moments that children have throughout the day with all the teachers that they pass by. There's an opportunity there to connect with them. And it might be a facial expression, it might be a gesture, it might be something you say or notice about them. So we spoke a lot about that kind of importance of just noticing that their bag looks heavy. They've got new shoes or they look taller today. Children always think they're taller, so that's always a safe option. Um, but it's just that in creating that environment where I am noticed here, and they're tiny interactions that make a huge difference, and they're important for everybody. It's lovely to be noticed. As I said, biologically we want to be noticed, but it's essential for children who aren't otherwise noticed or attended to, or haven't had their needs met in their home life. For for whatever reason, it's really difficult to meet their needs. This allows school to be that person for them.
I wrote some notes down about the things that help teachers to help students, things about routine and predictability, choice and control, and the feeling that they feel safe to learn, their nervous system is out of threat mode. Can you speak to those things?
If we can create environments where children come in and they know what to expect, it becomes regulating. And they know that this is going to happen and then the teacher's going to do this. It's not always time based. If you can do it based on time, great. But actually, just that idea that things happen in a predictable order. On a Monday we have this, on a Tuesday we do this, on a Friday we have this, or after lunch we do this. It means that you're creating an environment that feels like things happen when they're supposed to, and that can be really important for children who are anxious for whatever reason, that if things happen when they're supposed to and there's no kind of surprises or you're jolted into this new thing that you didn't know about, it settles your nervous system. And that's where choice and control comes in. So those tiny elements of a choice can be anything from what pencil you give someone to whether they go out to play in 2 minutes or in 5 minutes. It's just adding in like little doses of control to top up young people, particularly for children who are sometimes maybe described as over controlling or want to be in charge or want to be in control. That can be really challenging, but what we can see that as is that that's what they need. So how can we give them that, but on our terms as school staff? And that'll happen in therapy sessions. They'll need that level of control. So how can I even play this emotion game with them in a way that helps them feel that they've got some say over it? And little choices like, should we play this one or this one? It's not shall we play it, it's shall we play this bit or this bit. So you're setting the structure for the choice and the control, but still giving it in small doses. But it's great to just do that throughout the day, like giving them a choice of, do you want this pencil or this pencil? People like choice for a reason.
And how empowering as well for them to be able to have that choice, because kids don't have a lot of choice throughout their day and they really value it.
Yes, they really value it. And I remember being really struck on a personal note with my son in a hospital, and only one member of the nursing team asked him which ear he wanted his temperature checking in. Now, if you're in hospital, things are way out of your control. He was only 4, and he said, "I like her."
Oh.
Yeah, and that was the only difference that I could spot, other than her smile and her interactions. But they all did that. She gave him a choice of which ear he wanted the thermometer in, and it's big. It's bigger than we think. Those tiny interactions throughout the day are what can build a child up.
Oh, absolutely. You shared a quote that really resonated with me. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows. What does this look like in practice for teachers and schools?
I think when I started in the kind of trauma work, that was one of the things that I was really struck by. My role as a psychologist felt like I was seeing a child for an hour a week where I could teach them all these things and change their version of the world, themselves and others, or try to, for an hour, compared to being able to do it throughout the day for 7 hours a day? Priceless. Especially if that's the only opportunity a child's got to learn this, an hour a week. You'd want everybody in their network to be doing it. And that's what a trauma-informed approach for me is like. It's the whole system. It's the whole soil has to be teaching this language. But when I'm saying language, I'm meaning this emotional language, this emotional learning. It's an everyday occurrence. Our self-worth, as much as sometimes it would be handy if your self-worth was built up in an hour session with a psychologist, it isn't. It's built up from everyday interactions with the people who mean the most to you. So it felt like my responsibility to pass this knowledge on to those staff, those families who were spending all this time with children who needed that support, as opposed to seeing them on a one-to-one basis. I would absolutely do that as well. But I was very aware that your self-esteem has to come from yourself, your family, and your teachers. It ultimately does. It's always a teacher. When a child, I've worked with a lot of children in the care system, and when they talk about who was their person who changed things around for them, if it's not family, the next in line's a teacher.
And it's such a gift that we have as teachers. You talk about noticing. I see you. You matter. How do we do that?
So there's lots of ways to notice children, but I like the idea of you saying, how do we notice them better? And I often speak about some children finding it quite difficult to be noticed, particularly those with low self-esteem. They might find it hard for you to say, I like your drawing, or that's a really good piece of writing. If you're getting those children at those points kind of screwing that writing up or not enjoying that level of noticing, I'd always talk to educators about kind of just stepping that back. And again, maybe noticing that they're using a colour that you like. If you want to notice something like that. And I would often use in my clinical practice to notice children is a theraplay informed approach. And it's an approach that was developed by looking at the attachment relationships in really early life, and how we I suppose how we do that in everyday practice, how we do that when children are older than infants. And that's those really small interactions of noticing what you see. Whether you see them when they're upset, or whether you see them when they're looking proud of themselves, or again, whether you see that they've got taller or that their bag's heavy. It's all those tiny moments that you're helping them feel seen and heard. And in those really difficult moments, helping child feel seen and heard when they might be withdrawn in the classroom, for example. Noticing them in those moments, in whichever way you can. That might be a tap on the shoulder, a little rub on the shoulder, if that that feels okay for them. That might be passing them something. That you're saying, I can see you. I don't always have time to deal with this right now. I know that's always a question when I do school training, is how do we do this when there's 30 other children coming into the classroom? See, one child has arrived and they're not okay. And I think the message there is, in whichever way works, help them know you've seen them. And if the way you've helped them, if you pass them a fidget or a teddy bear and they knock it off the table, it doesn't matter in that moment because you've tried. And if we want children to learn anything, it's that people will try to help you. A massive, massive lesson to learn, even if we don't get it right, even if we guess your emotion wrong, or we pass you the fidget that you don't like. I'm trying. People try to help.
And so when a child does come in withdrawn, or they're acting out and you can see something isn't quite right, what else can we be doing?
I always talk to schools about, it's an emotional coaching model that Dan Hughes talks about, and he calls it PACE. And it's very much this kind of idea initially to kind of connect with that, what you're seeing, that acknowledge and empathy. He always talks about being first. So if you can acknowledge that you don't seem quite right today, or you look sad, whatever you know as a teacher, and as a psychologist, I know how well teaching staff know their students.
They really do.
They really do. And that's the great advantage of training schools in this kind of whole school approach, is that there's so much opportunity to do this. And notice them in those moments, to be able to name what you see. Do you seem like you're struggling? It looks like today's been a bit hard. So you're not asking any questions. You're certainly not asking them to tell you how they feel or what's happened in that instance. So again, time-wise, it's not a lot of demand on a staff member to just let them know, I've seen things are not okay for you right now.
I
And you
think
can,
giving young people the skills and strategies to understand and manage their emotions is so important. And as you say, validating what you're seeing as well. How can schools bring that kind of emotional learning into the day-to-day classroom life?
yeah, so even in that example that we just spoke about the kind of withdrawn child, you might be able to wonder with them later once you've got the time. So listening's so powerful. Being able to name their emotion at the time that they're experiencing it is a bit of a soapbox for me, because it's being able to name someone's emotion when it's being experienced in their body is so much more powerful than trying to teach emotions.
Mm.
If we teach emotions as if it's an academic subject, we won't learn it at a body brain level. So I'll sometimes work with children who can name lots of emotions. They can't apply them in the situation
Mm.
because they've not learnt them in the situation. So I always get in a bit of a soapbox about this because there's so many tools and strategies around and cards and charts to teach children about emotions, but they need to be learning them in the moment. I'm not saying we don't want to use all those cards and strategies and charts to teach children emotions, but if you want to do it at a more effective level so that
Mm.
children are learning the emotions as they're experiencing them, we need to be naming them when they're experiencing them.
Strategies and language are really important, but reflecting on things that happen in the moment is more effective.
If you reflect on an emotion when a child's experiencing it, so the example might be if somebody's withdrawn, you might name an emotion as you seem really sad. Again, not worrying too much that we might be wrong,
Mm.
but we're putting an emotion word into a little person and, oh, is this what sadness is?
Mm.
I've learnt it. If we learn it academically, it's a bit like trying to teach a child to ride a bike by reading a manual. We have to feel the bike. We have to get on it and be in
Mm.
the moment. And that's when you can use those games and all the resources that are around. And I created Teddy's Deck of Emotions to be quite unique in that way, in that it talks educators and parents through how to express those emotions with a child in the moment, but it's through play. So you're
Mm.
playing memory, for example, with these cards, and you're commenting on how frustrating it feels to not be able to find the other frustrated,
Mm.
how confusing it is that you don't know where the other happy one is. So as you're turning the cards, that you're experiencing the emotion and you're naming it. So it's great to do it in play because it's tolerable, but doing it in those moments, if the timing's right and the child's regulated enough for you to say, you seem really annoyed about whatever it might be, losing netball. You seem really annoyed about having spilt your drink.
Mm.
It's really powerful because you're giving the child the emotional word that fits with their bodily sensation. That's the difference of trying to teach at a body brain level as opposed to an academic, this is what anger feels like, look at this card.
Mm.
It's very different.
Yeah, I love the idea of them seeing the card and being able to bring some understanding about how that emotion feels, because that language is really important as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and with emotion cards and teaching emotional understanding to children, if we do it through play, they learn quicker. If we do it through play, they learn it at both levels. They learn it academically, but also at a biological level. So if there's the capacity within schools to teach these tiny emotional skills throughout the day, and teachers be naming them. So Tanya Bryson in Whole Brain Child talks about name it to tame it. So if we
Yes.
name an emotion, it will tame it. It's kind of the reason we look up symptoms, because we want a name for them. We want to
Mm.
know what's wrong. For children, they don't always know what that feeling is. So it becomes more threatening and dysregulating when they don't know.
And I think the more information children have, the more knowledge they have, the more tools they have in their toolbox, essentially, then they can start to regulate their own emotions as well. You talk about the hand brain model of Dan Siegel's. Can you talk us through that and how it helps young people?
Yeah, so I really enjoy teaching practitioners and children this. It's more fun when you teach children because I have a
Mm.
lizard puppet and a hedgehog and
Mm.
a monkey, to just teach them the different biological parts of the brain and how this lower part of the brain, I described it the brain stem with the fight flight system and the amygdala, and how we've got our emotional system and then our kind of logical system as the cortex here. And that in some instances a child's lid or parent's lid or adult's lid would flip. And in those moments, you've got a lot of dysregulation. And often what we're asked in training is, what do you do when a lid's like this? Very, very difficult to be able to do very much in that moment. And we'll often get children whose lids will flip, and some children whose lids will flip more often. And what we'll often see in children with trauma is their lids flip more often and they take longer to calm down and comfort and get back connected. So we want to think about if a child's brain has flipped and the amygdala fight flight emotional system is in charge, logic's gone offline, which is why we want to remove questions at that point. We certainly don't want to be walking somebody over to a chart and saying, what emotion are you right now? That would definitely go down very well anyway. You'd know that wasn't the right thing to do, I'm pretty sure. Because the job is to see if you can calm and connect this brain back down so that it's all reconnected, it's back online before we do anything. So that moment we're looking for, how do we comfort this child? How do we comfort this young person? But the really important thing throughout the school day in particular is, and you'll know with teaching, is that you'll get this kind of almost flip lid throughout the day. So we want to be helping children notice when that's building up, what they can do, and having those daily doses of regulation to bring it back down. I think it's essentially why we see children fidgeting, biting nails, rocking on the chair. They're doing it themselves. They're often doing it in a way that doesn't work very well in a school, rocking on your chair, but it's emotionally regulating.
How incredibly powerful to be having those constant conversations about, your lid flipping, or how you feel when your lid's flipped, or what you could be doing before your lid flips. I think that's really important conversations we can be having in our classrooms to support young people, because when their lid does flip, there's a lot of shame there, right? And it's embarrassing and it's frustrating for them as well. And we want to be able to support them with that so they can actually feel like they have some confidence to be able to navigate it when they are feeling really overwhelmed and emotionally dysregulated.
Yeah. And I think it does take away a lot of the shame and blame when you describe it as a lid flipping, and especially if it's a lizard. It's a part of the brain that is very similar to a reptile's brain, and children really enjoy the kind of metaphors and analogies of thinking that this is more like a type of primitive lizard brain, and then the cleverer part, and sometimes the lizard takes over. So how do we make the lizard feel safe again? We have the advantage in Australia that there's a lot of lizards around, and children are very, very familiar with how scared lizards are, even if you're not planning to hurt them. And we have this open conversation, open dialogue about why they do that, because they don't understand. We can't talk to them. It's not a talking part. It's a feeling safe part.
I think if we can have those conversations, or, say something like, oh, I flipped my lid this morning, or my lid flipped over the weekend when this happened. You talk about it reducing the nervous system response. You're not alone. So they're seeing it a little bit less as a threat, knowing that everyone experiences this. Can you speak to that?
In my work, I can often see a lot of children who don't understand their brain. And I created the kind of science of emotions show at one point to try and help children understand the science of emotions, the science of why our brains sometimes do that. And we make what's often called a bad choice. We're not really making a bad choice a lot of the time. We're making a nervous system threat response choice. And that's when children can feel a bit more shame, when they think that they've chosen to do something. But actually, it was a reaction to a threat. That threat we can't always see. That might be a sensory threat. And in those moments, the lid's flipped. We've acted in a way that's not okay, but it wasn't a choice. And removing that sort of language is really important, because then we're recognizing that actually something happened to us and we needed to do something different.
Mm. Oh, absolutely. Can you speak to us a little bit about your work with TEDology and how that is helping young people at the moment?
Yeah, so my work with TEDology came about through being in clinical work and then my experience with families and schools over the last 15 years, and really recognizing that idea that how can we get this knowledge and this information and these skills that I spend so long in one-to-one sessions often helping children learn and helping families understand into everyday moments, everyday homes, everyday centres and schools in a way that works for children. And I already knew children were using teddy bears for comfort, but also for emotional expression. So children will talk to teddy bears often before they're ready to talk to adults about it. And that's essentially very, very helpful. So it's very helpful to talk out loud to a person, but it's also very helpful to express it in whichever way you can manage. And that might be writing, drawing, or talking to a teddy bear.
Mm.
Because once we say something out loud, we can process it differently. We can process it at a higher level of the brain. So it's very neuroscientific as to why it's helpful to talk. So I would be encouraging children in my clinic to talk to their teddies out loud so that they could express those emotions, and then the brain can help it can help be processed.
Mm. And are there certain sentence starters that you use to help young people, or certain, emotions that you give them along with a teddy bear, or is it just their own opportunity
I
to
have
express?
to
Ah,
regulate with the bear whenever I'm in.
amazing.
The bear is also multisensory, so it's very useful to have when you're on a podcast.
Yes, I can imagine.
He's on my knee constantly, this bear,
Yeah,
and not just to make an appearance. It was literally because it's very, very
supporting.
soothing.
Yeah.
So he has fidget friendly paws.
Mm.
It's lightly weighted with textured ears and nose, and then all the sensory tags. So in terms of regulation, it opens up conversations about which parts of the bear do you like, which parts of the bear help calm your nervous system. So children
Mm.
are getting that sense from just playing with the bear and talking about it, either with parents or in school settings, of we're all different.
Mm.
Because if you had a bear on your knee, you might be fidgeting with the tags, and the tags
Mm.
are all sensory. They're all different. Children design this. Bear with me. This is why it's quite so clever. 40 children here in Perth designed TEDology with me, and it included the features from everything from it having one crinkly ear to it not having a crinkly ear. It's got two
Ah.
types of ears. Because some children are comforted by not having a sound, and some are comforted by the auditory stimulation that it has. So that we've really thought of everything in terms of meeting that sensory need and
Mm.
building up that sensory system. I would be encouraging families to have this as something they would do each morning. Mornings before school can be a big rush, but that means you're getting children into school, and families are often trying to drop children off into school who are slightly dysregulated.
Mm.
We always recognise that if children haven't had breakfast or a drink, they might not feel able to learn. But for me, if they've not had sensory comfort in a
Mm.
morning, they're going to find it harder to learn.
Mm.
They're going to find it harder to go throughout the day without regulation.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to be intentional with that and give them the opportunity within the morning. And I love that it has all of the different sensory soothing options as well. And how beautiful that it was designed with children.
Yeah. So, and in addition to that, I suppose, in terms of as a psychologist, I was in clinic seeing children and thinking about how much I would like them to be able to remember the skills we'd learned in session, to be able to take those skills home, do them with
Mm.
their family, for their teaching staff to know that these are really effective strategies grounded in science that you can learn at home. And we were finding all creative ways of doing that with notepads and pencils, and encouraging them to talk to their teddies out loud and describing why, and giving them emotion cards and playing emotion games. And I just really understood the need to create something that children naturally engage with that could be in their home. And when you squeeze its tummy, it has a voice box and it will talk children through 10 different activities, some of which are kind of foundational naming emotions. So it'll ask them to draw emotions. It comes with emotion cards, all the way through to how do we calm emotions. So the little chap goes through mindful stretches, breathing activities, all the way through to resilience and asking about a time a child's been brave. It's really important that children have a library, if you like, of stories about themselves as a brave person. And it might be that they went high on a swing. But they need these stories accessible for when they have to be brave in the future.
And it's also developing their self-awareness, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just love that. As teachers, we struggle at times with fidget toys, when to give them, how to give them, what to give them, how they engage with it. What do you say about that in classrooms?
Yeah, I mean that is a really tricky one because most children I know will want them. And my son's school have some wobble chairs. And he says, we just fight over the wobble chairs. Ideally, I'd like them all to be wobble chairs, but I don't know how that would go down.
I quite like a wobble chair myself.
Yeah, I would like a wobble chair. I'd quite like them to all be wobble chairs, but I don't know what that would look like in a classroom. I've not checked out that suggestion with teaching staff. But I suppose sometimes they will need fidgets more because there's parts of the day, as you've said, children don't have a lot of control throughout the day. And not having control can often dysregulate our system. Not having a choice dysregulates our system a little bit. For some children, less than others. But what they're looking for is this daily dose of emotional comfort. So if we think about emotional health like we think about physical health, we are allowing children to have sips of water throughout the day. What they're asking for is to fidget throughout the day, to have some emotional comfort as well. And it's becoming a bit of a tricky dilemma because they're messing with their fidgets. But if we can build that into everyday interactions, so in one school in particular that have got the bear, and you can do it with any creative means you like. I just suppose I created this to be a tool. It's a bear, but it's a box of resources that teaching staff can have in classrooms to get out and say, let's see what the bear's got to say. And they do a down-regulating activity after recess, after lunch. It takes 2 minutes, if that. And then what you would get, or what the hope is that they've had their regulation, they can get on with their learning now.
So it's about the communication and the boundaries around them as well then, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so it's always about the communication and how you set the guidelines. You acknowledge that they might need that, but we need to use it at this time or this time for this length of time. But it's so much easier for staff because you've got so many children with different needs. And I think that seems like it's increasing all the time, the level of flexibility that you have to have across the needs of young people, that if it's built into a routine, so this is what we do when we come in the morning, this is what we do after recess, it's really not a lot of effort to do it. That was my intention of most psychology that I do. I don't ever, as a mum, I don't ever want to give other mums more jobs.
Yes.
As somebody who's worked in schools a lot, I don't want to give teachers more jobs either. So it's kind of like, how can you make this as easy to fit in as possible? And if you put something into a routine and it becomes part of how the classroom runs or how your home runs, that actually you do this before you go to school and you do it before bed. And you have it in the car on the journey there, so you can fidget and top up your nervous system, your self-soothe system beforehand. I often coin it like fidget first. It's the equivalent of having a drink before a run. We wouldn't consider not having a drink before we went for a run, but we are considering allowing children to be without their parents for a day.
Yes, that's right.
Without comfort. That's what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to be without their safest person in the world for 7 hours a day and then saying, why do they all want fidgets? Same reason they want a drink. It's
that's
long.
right. I love the way that you talk about routine, and I love the importance that you place on giving children control in their day. You also talk about emotional regulation and giving them moments throughout the day so that they can emotionally regulate. If a classroom teacher, we've got large class sizes, what are some things that classroom teachers can do to allow those reset times for young people?
Schools already do such a beautiful job a lot of the time of finding creative ways that children can have that downtime. And it can be things as simple as having quiet time where they're colouring in.
Mm,
It's very regulating that. We can enhance it by what they colour in,
mm,
being maybe more emotion content in that, even if it's a feeling. And so I've got some downloadable colouring thing that's just a bare relaxing that says relaxed, because it's
mm.
just getting those words into their vocabulary really easily. So everything from those moments where you give them time to draw or write about their day or draw what's happened, or just those moments as a group to do an activity that might be a few minutes stretching, a few minutes calming throughout the day, and helping them notice when they need to. So some classrooms have really done a lovely job of having an area where when children can notice maybe that their lids flipping or they need that, they can go to this area
A
and
regulation space,
get a
yes,
regulation space that's there for that purpose.
definitely. And those moments of regulation, you can see their nervous system settle. And we know that if we can regularly calm everyone's nervous system throughout the day, they are going to leave school and feel more regulated when they move into their own home again.
Yeah, and you hear a lot, and you will as in the teaching sphere, but particularly as a psychologist, hear the difficulties parents can have after drop off. And when I was designing technology with the children, they acknowledged that hangry is a real emotion. We put it into the emotion pack because it's
Mm,
not often recognised in the emotional language. But when we pick children up from school, they can be quite hungry. They can maybe be thirsty. But
mm,
actually, they also need a lot of regulation at those times because they've gone without it throughout the day. What I'm trying to do is one, support parents of how do you do that at home
mm,
in a creative way, because one strategy is not good for everybody. It won't work for everybody, and we can sometimes overdo the same strategy. And so
mm,
you don't want to just be teaching children breathing, or just be teaching them mindfulness, or just be teaching them to colour when they're stressed. They need to be exposed to all the emotional strategies that then they can find one that works for them now, and then that might change in the future. We
yes,
have to expose them to it.
I totally agree. And again, it's like that self awareness, isn't it? About what works for me. I
Well,
know when
yeah,
I get into the car, I'm going to be hungry, so maybe I'll pack an extra snack in the car, or someone's going to pack a snack that's going to allow me to be able to transition
yeah.
into home a little bit easier. If a school could change just one thing about education, in your opinion, what should it be?
I think if a school could change one thing, in my opinion, I would want to see, my dream would be to see that all schools are managing and approaching everything from principles all the way through to policy in a trauma informed well-being way, because I think it's beneficial to all the children. I think
Mm,
some children need it, some children will benefit from it, and the staff will benefit from it. Because when you're a staff member and you're intentionally doing something to help another person, and that might be giving them a tiny choice, but you know you've done it intentionally. You know that you've noticed they've got new shoes intentionally to make them feel set. You've noticed that they've got new shoes intentionally because you know that will build up their self-worth just a little bit. It'll make them feel
mm,
seen, and how important that is. And if schools can understand that at a principle level, as in not the principle, the principle of that and the
mm,
importance of that, um, it's very good for teacher well-being. It's very good for educator well-being, because you're doing these little random acts of kindness throughout the day, but they're part of your interactions. They're part of how you speak. It's, for me, a trauma-informed approach is like a different language.
mm.
Once schools learn that language, it's as easy as the language we're already learning. It's as easy as the language that we're talking about behaviour and consequences and attention seeking. If we turn that around to use a different trauma-informed language, it doesn't become harder, it just becomes different and more beneficial to all. I've worked in schools that have zero tolerance policies in the UK, and they would have children in the care system coming in and having to adhere to the consequences of not bringing a pencil. And that would be so unhelpful for teachers because they knew what this child had been through, and they're having to give a consequence for someone forgetting a pencil, knowing if you had their life, you'd forget your pencil as well.
It's the least of their worries, right?
Least of their worries. And the trauma-informed approach, it's not without boundaries, it's not without consequences, but they're just done in such a more compassionate way, with the focus being on what are they going to learn from this.
And we need more of that in schools, don't we? That compassion, that care, that empathy. It's why I absolutely loved hearing your talk. I could speak to you all day about this because it really, really is important that we are coming from that human-centered lens in schools at the moment.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's just been an absolute joy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
What a beautiful conversation. Louise reminds us that the heart of effective teaching isn't just curriculum or content. It's the environment we create, the relationships we nurture, and the ways we respond to students' emotional and physiological needs. In her advocacy for a trauma-informed approach in schools, she highlights how creating supportive environments benefits everyone: students, teachers, and the wider school community. I love the multisensory interactive teddy bear resource Louise has designed with children to support emotional literacy, understanding, regulation, and resilience. I encourage you to seek out Tedology and follow her inspiring work. If this conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with a colleague or a friend who might benefit as well. Thanks so much for being here today.